I am live. I am reading out of Lord of the Horizon. It's a far memory book by Joan Grant. She was able to recall her previous lives. She wrote 7 books of this. And this one is the story where she is Ra-Ab in ancient Egypt. And we are here in the, I think it's the 4th or the 3rd, sorry. We're in a new part of the book. It is part 4, chapter 3, entitled Ceremonial Masks. Though Neri and Becket had to occupy their official residence when in the royal city, I gave them my estate of the 2 winds, so that within 2 hours they could reach a home which would give them an illusion of being in the hair. 6 months after Neri's appointment, Mary and I went there to stay with them. We arrived earlier than our forerunner had anticipated and found Becket swimming in the pool, with her 3 children. The eldest girl and her brother, 2 years younger, scrambled out of the water and came running towards us. The youngest, who was within a few days of her 3rd anniversary, favoured us with a smile and then paddled off to the far end of the pool without taking any further notice of us. Neri came home soon after the children had gone to bed. He and Becket disliked being parted, as did Mary and I, so when his duties necessitated his spending the night in the royal city, she always accompanied him. I was thankful to see he did not seem oppressed by his responsibilities and realized that I had been unduly apprehensive. Their happiness did not depend upon environment, and provided they were together, I think they would have found tranquility even among the barbarians. Neri, I said, I rejoice to find that formality has not been too heavy a yoke for you to carry. He smiled. It might have been if Becket and I had not made it a kind of game. It was Becket who taught me to recognize that the measured phrases and elaborate ceremonial of the court is a disguise which people have worn for so long that they have come to believe in it. We try to discover who is hiding behind the mask. Sometimes the real person peers out like a furtive animal glimpsed for a moment in the tall reeds. Is it a water rat or a wild cat? That quick shape which you only saw out of the corner of your eyes. Turning those talking statues into human beings is rather like teaching animals long hunted to gain confidence. What makes it more exciting is that until almost the last moment you never know the nature of your quarry. Sometimes you bend down thinking to tickle a kitten behind its ear to find a leopard's teeth through your hand. Or you might go out to hunt a crocodile and find the ripples were caused only by a baby hippo browsing in the shallows. I hope there are more hippos than crocodiles. In the north it would be unwise to bathe without first inspecting the water with due care. You mean the nobles favour Senusert? If they recognize the quality of Senusert, it shows that they are not altogether without wisdom. For if they think he will agree to become a gate through which they can escape their responsibilities, it shows that they have not the wit of the great saurians. Then you consider that the anxiety of the old vizier was unfounded? It was justified in so far as there will always be men who prefer to work against rather than for the community. If a man gives in the name of affection, he himself is enriched. But should he refuse to follow the great law of Ra, he must hoard his poor possessions, pride and power and ancestry, that pitiful treasure with which some men try to defend their loneliness. Are there many such men in the north? Yes, and there are also some in the south. It is very surprising that when animals live each in a secret lair, whenever they hear the reeds rustle, They flee from the noise without even pausing to inquire whether it might be their mate in search of them. When men take off their masks, they recognize their brotherhood. But until then they remain separate, weary and suspicious, savage in their fear. The older nobles may perhaps resent having to acknowledge the authority of a vizier so much younger than themselves. I think that at first they welcomed the change. They believed their years had brought them power, and that it would be easy to outwit me. They soon found they were wrong, said Beckett. They were so surprised, the old ones, to find that we were not impressed by their false dignity. They had heard of the nomarchs of the hair, and I think stories about me must have improved with the telling. The first time we stayed with the Ibex, his house is near the sea, on the boundary of the western desert, he had expected me to bring all my animals with me. A courtyard had been set aside for them, with food of different kinds, sufficient to feed a herd. I think he was disappointed to find me so ordinary. I should hardly call you ordinary, Beckett, I said with a smile. Oh, but I can be when I try. In 3 days you are coming with us to the city, and then you will see that I can be as ordinary as anyone else. The house of the vizier was second only to the palace in magnificence, and when our carrying litters passed under the pylon of the outer courtyard, a bodyguard of 100 wearing the royal colours lined the way to the doors of the great entrance. Neary and Beckett had preceded us earlier in the day, and as they were occupied with official duties, we were conducted to our apartments by the steward of the household. Even in the bedrooms there were elaborate wall paintings, and the ceilings were supported by pillars. I'm glad I didn't remember how oppressive such magnificence can be, I said to Mary. Oh, I think some other vizier would rule instead of Neary. I thought Beckett might be different after living here, but I'm so glad she hasn't changed. Did she say anything to you about Amenemhet? I never mentioned him, for I know how she cherishes the time when she can be with her children and forget the city. She has not spoken to Pharaoh except on the occasion of Neary's official appointment as vizier. And Neary? He is the vizier, yet in all official matters he refers not to Pharaoh, but to the co-ruler. Senusert ascribes this to Amenemhet's wish to make the transition of rulership as smooth as possible. The new officials are to regard Senusert as the supreme authority from the moment they take office. Only those who have long been in Amenemhet's service, and of these few remain, still take their orders directly from him. If he feels like that, why doesn't he give the crook and flail to Senusert? It is not unusual for Pharaoh to abdicate in favor of his son, and surely if Amenemhet finds the burden of rulership too heavy for him, he should have the courage to admit it. Royden told me that he had suggested such a course to Amenemhet. The suggestion was made in friendship, but it was received in hostility. Amenemhet replied, "Only at my death shall I relinquish the crook and flail. Those who wish them to pass to other hands must look to death to be their emissary." Amenemhet said that to Royden? He caused those words to be scribed and sent them enclosed with a formal acknowledgment of the tribute from the horizon of Horus. I shall talk to Patakifa about him, said Mary decisively. Senusert is too loyal to his father to say much, even to you, but women are quicker to recognize when discretion is no longer valuable. Yes, I shall certainly talk to Patakifa. It is ridiculous that Senusert, our Senusert, should be troubled by a father who seems to be making things difficult for everybody. I smiled. Will you promise to tell me when I'm becoming a trouble to Ameni? Of course I shall, only it will never happen, for we are not afraid of growing old, and it's fear that makes people tiresome. That evening some of the more important nobles attended a banquet, which Beckett was giving in our honour. I'm afraid most of them are very dull, she said, but you and Mother can play the game of who is behind the mask. Becket did not need a mask to be the wife of the vizier. I caught my breath when she entered the room where her guests were assembled. She was poised as an opening lotus. Her dress was of green mist linen, pleated to her feet. Her jewels were of gold and malachite, and in her hand was a spray of sesame flowers, also of gold. On each side of her walked a leopard, the twin daughters of the one she had taken with her to Neri. They were mild and intelligent as cats. The lamps struck high lights from their burnished skins and sparks from their gold collars. "She is magnificent," whispered Mary. Each guest in turn came forward to be presented to us. I wondered what they would have thought had they known that their hostess, so proud, so dignified, murmured without moving her lips a prelude to the formal words of introduction. Of a tall woman, languid, her voice warm as a purring cat, she said, "Monkey, who always snatches food from its neighbor." As the woman greeted us, I thought, monkey? Why is she like a monkey? Surely feline would be more appropriate. It was only later that I recognized the depth of Becket's wit. I saw this woman gather men about her, while in the background the wives concealed their annoyance. None of the men were desirable to her, except in that they belonged, or she thought they belonged, to someone else. A servant passed carrying a dish of fruit. She took a fig, sniffed its warm scent, and, hoping to look even more provocative, laughed up at the man beside her. Her small white teeth bit into the fruit that was sweet, because it was a symbol of that which grew beyond the wall of her garden. I looked up and saw Becket watching me. Our eyes met, and I knew she was thinking, "Wasn't I right, Father?" A moment later she had a chance to speak to me without being overheard. "Can't you hear her chattering? But she is well trained. She doesn't pull the wigs off people who annoy her." "I prefer your monkeys," I said, "who have not forgotten how to swing by their tails." A man, perhaps 60 years old, wearing the heavy wig fashionable in his generation, was approaching us. "One of our most respected tortoises," murmured Becket. "Perhaps you could persuade him to peer from his shell and even to take some refreshment at your hands." He was indeed a tortoise. I tried to lure him beyond the meaningless phrases of formality. I offered many topics for his delectation, but none served to inspire him with any desire for original thought. He had a genius for asking questions which required only the most dull and factual answers. What was the level of my granaries? What did I consider to be the best strain of cattle? What were the prospects for the next harvest? At last I realized that he considered those gnomes which did not adjoin the royal city to be no more than outlying farms, valued only for such produce as was useful to people like himself. He owed his position to the name he had inherited, and to an inborn lack of initiative, which had prevented him doing anything sufficiently positive to merit either praise or condemnation. His value to the community could at best be only that of antiquity, a tree which is cherished for its age, although its boughs are no longer fruitful. He, I think, had borne no His value to the community could at best be only that of antiquity, a tree which is cherished for its age, although its boughs are no longer fruitful. He, I think, had borne no fruit even in youth, yet it was obvious he thought of the nomarch of the Oryx to be no more than a prosperous farmer, who out of courtesy should be put at his ease. I recognized that a few of the company had a very real affection for Becket. The others were duly impressed by the wife of the vizier. She was so polished, so very beautiful. I thought of the Becket I had seen yesterday, running through a bean field with her children, hair streaming in the wind, her feet naked to the warm earth. Yet Becket was alive even in this coffin of ceremonial, even when surrounded by people of whom many were almost indistinguishable from the likeness which would be painted on the mummy case. So, the next chapter is chapter 4, and it is entitled Fear in the Palace. Have a good Friday.